We're talking about how to start an LLC in Texas, and in this video, we're going to be covering a lot of topics. But before we get to that, I do want to make mention that there are affiliate links in the description of this video, and they're there for a couple of reasons. One, I do make a commission when you use my links, but also throughout this video, we're going to talk about how certain services can overcharge you up to $1,500 if you go down the wrong path. But before we even get into the LLC services out there, we're going to be going through this checklist here and through this document that you can see on the screen that I'm casting from my computer. And we're going to cover everything you need to know about getting your LLC set up correctly. And this is going to be really important because I don't want you to have issues that creep up down the line that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars in legal damages. So I like to call those issues the LLC dumpster fire. That happens because you're unfamiliar with terms such as piercing the corporate veil, commingling fund, registered agents, and pass-through taxation. Now, on top of that, after LLC formation, perhaps you don't look into how the LLC renewal process works, or you're not familiar with business licenses and permits and getting those set up correctly. Now, to explain everything that we're going to cover in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to start with talking about what an LLC actually does for your business, and then use hypothetical examples so that you can fully understand all these terms so that you don't run into these common pitfalls that a lot of new business owners run into. So first, why don't we talk about what the LLC does? It offers two things for you: limited liability protection and pass-through taxation. Now, let's go with an example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC. Now, what you have here is the business owner in the center. Let's say it's a sole proprietorship. On the left-hand side, you have their personal assets. That's their personal home, car, and bank account. On the right-hand side, you have the business assets. So that's the point of sale, the business bank account, the physical location, the lights, the espresso machine. Everything is connected directly back to that business owner. When you're set up like this, there is just a lot of inherent liability in this situation. Now, let's talk about owning an LLC that owns the coffee shop. This looks a lot different. Now we have that business owner over with their personal assets on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we're calling it Acme Coffee LLC. So now all those assets within the business are underneath that LLC. The important thing here and why the LLC is so powerful is this red line in the middle. This is a division between your personal and business assets. That is referred to as the corporate veil. The reason that's important is if you were to hypothetically be sued, they can come after your business assets, but not your personal assets because you have a good LLC set up and intact. But the issue here comes in with the term piercing the corporate veil, if you recall that term we just mentioned. We're going to explain that through another term, commingling funds. Now, in this example here, let's say that the business owner got set up but didn't get a business bank account set up right away. They ended up running business transactions through their personal bank account. This is considered commingling funds, and it creates a potential crack in your LLC. Now, if somebody gets hurt at your coffee shop and they hire an attorney to sue you, that attorney is going to try to find those cracks. If they can present the evidence to the judge that you've been commingling funds, the judge may give them permission to pierce the corporate veil. Now, when that happens, you can see where this is going. This division in the center between your personal and business assets disappears, and they can come after not just your business assets, but your personal car, home, and bank account. That's why little things like this as you're watching this video, and it's so important to watch the entire video so you're aware of all these pitfalls. So lesson number one here is when you do get your LLC set up eventually, you want to get a business bank account set up as soon as possible so you don't have that pitfall of commingling funds. Now, what I want to talk about is an explanation of pass-through taxation. This is more so geared just so that you understand what's going to happen at tax time when you have an LLC. So again, we have Acme Coffee LLC, grossed $140,000, $90,000 of expenses, resulting in $50,000 of net income. The IRS is not taxing the LLC. They are taxing the individual on your personal tax returns. This $50,000 passes through, also sometimes referred to as flow-through taxation. Those words are used interchangeably to your personal tax return. So just know that you're not filing a separate, tax return for your LLC. It's flowing through, passing through to your personal tax return, which is actually pretty helpful because it helps to reduce the amount of paperwork you have to do at tax time. But also I wanted to make you aware of another thing, because again, this video series isn't just about setting up your LLC or avoiding all the pitfalls. It's also about how to optimize your LLC. You'll see right here, there is a mention here that you can in the future apply an S-Corp designation to your LLC to save on taxes via dividends. We're going to be talking about that towards the end of this video, but that applies when you start making around $40,000 to $50,000 of net income. You want to look into to taking your LLC and applying it as an S-Corp. So it's a very flexible entity type, and we're gonna get to that later in the video, which is pretty cool because you might be able to save money in the future just from watching this video. Because I've seen so many business owners, they just don't know these things. And then all of a sudden they're looking backwards and they're like, oh my gosh, I lost out on like $40,000 of extra taxes because my accountant didn't tell me this, or I didn't think to ask because I didn't know. So keep on watching. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through the checklist of starting your LLC. First thing I have on here is get this checklist for yourself and explore the bonuses and glossary. Now, what you'll see is a QR code on the screen. You can scan that to get this free checklist. This is what's called a Notion doc. This lives in the cloud, and this will be continually updated to only improve with time. But there's some really cool resources, and there's also a link in the description below if you want to get this. But let's first start with the bonuses. So there's an AI chatbot here that's really cool. What you can do is ask it questions like, how to start an LLC in Texas. And this will give you detailed instructions on how to do that. But if you're also struggling with just like, what do you call your LLC? What do you want to name it? This tool can help brainstorm names for you. So it's just an AI chat tool that you can use to assist you throughout the process. There's a question down here, how do I register an EIN? We're actually going to explain that in the process of this video as well, but there's just so many things that pop up where it becomes kind of like overwhelming. It's cool to have this little assistant that can help answer questions for you. Later in the video, we're also going to be talking about this yearly accounting calendar and what these dates mean. This is going to be super helpful for you. And again, I know this can be overwhelming, but we're just going to break this thing down for you. That's why we're using this checklist too, because I want to make it as easy as possible and you to have a resource that you can go back to. Last thing I'll mention before we get started here is the glossary of terms. There's a lot of terms in here that I may not mention or explain in the video. You can go here and check it out. This video is only 4 minutes long. It could save you about a couple $100. It's a common LLC scam that people run into after formation. So just a lot of cool resources. You're getting ready to start your LLC and you're wondering like, well, which path do you go? There's really 3 paths. You can use the state website, you can use online LLC services, or you can go through a business attorney. The path you go depends on your situation and your comfort level and also who you are as a person, right? And we're going to be getting into questions on this. So this is part 1. In part 2, we're really going to explore those 3 different options. But for the sake of going through this and showing you how to set up an LLC, we're going to start with just going through the state website. Next, we need to decide on a name for your LLC. There's a few things to mention here. Number 1 is that the name needs to be unique within the state of Texas. You can't take an LLC name that somebody else is already using in the state. But the other thing that's important to know is that your LLC name is not necessarily your brand name. Now, going back to Acme Coffee LLC, terrible name for a coffee shop, but you can do something called a DBA, a doing business as, sometimes referred to as a fictitious name, and you can apply that, and then that could be like Espresso Yourself Cafe, and then that becomes your brand name. So don't feel like you have to put a lot of pressure on yourself to come up with the perfect name for your LLC. What you need to do though is you need to search the availability of that business name. There's a state directory link here. And then when this opens up, we're gonna go down to Texas. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna put in the entity name. Now, if I put in Longhorns, and I do a search, what you see here is a lot of different businesses. So it's like Longhorns and Cowboys. When you take a look at this, and I'm gonna blur out the information because this is somebody's business here, but it's all public data. You're gonna see the registered agent office name. You're gonna see the mailing address. You're gonna see the registered agent's name. So this is a lot of private data potentially. And we're gonna talk later about ways that you can help to give a little bit more privacy to your business if that matters to you. But as far as the name itself, let's go back a little bit. And let's say I just kind of jam out on the keyboard like this and do a search. Now at the top, it says that that business name was not found. That is what you want to see. That's telling you that you have a unique name within the state of Texas. So then once you have your name, you're ready to get started and form your LLC. The first thing here is register your LLC name. The reason I'm mentioning this is sometimes people think when they register the name that they have set up their LLC. That is not the case. Registering an LLC name is like buying a domain to start a website. You own the domain, but you haven't actually built the website yet. When you are getting your LLC set up, you can, claim the name, register it, but what you actually have to do is write your articles of organization. So what we have here is another state directory link built into this free document for you. And these bullet points will kind of explain what the articles of organization are. But what we're gonna do is, again, we're gonna go down to Texas and then we're gonna take a look at this. So there are instructions on the first pages here. We're gonna skip those right now because we're just gonna cover a few key points. So right here, what you can see is that in the state of Texas, it's called a Certificate of Formation Limited Liability Company. This is what we're filling out. And these are your articles. You have Article 1, Article 2, etc. You'll see here that there is a filing fee of $300. There is one loophole, not really a loophole, but one way to get around that. But if you're going through the state website, an online legal tool, and those are ones like, LegalZoom, Bizee, Zen Business, Taylor Brands, or a business attorney, you're going to pay $300 to the Secretary of State. All right. There's no way around that fee unless you are a veteran. If you are a veteran, you will want to go through the state website. And the reason for that is what you're seeing right here. It's something called the Senate Bill 938. And this is as of January 1st, 2022, that $300 state filing fee is waived if you're a veteran. I believe in every situation, you'd have to go directly through the state website to receive that $300 discount. But if you are a veteran, I would recommend then going through the state. So this is where a lot of content online annoys me because there's a lot of people like myself that make these videos that'll be like, use my affiliate link, because they want to make a commission. I don't want to make a commission if it's going to cost you $300 if you would have gone a different route. What I want to do is make sure that you are getting the best possible price and service, and it's the right fit for your needs when you're getting set up. So once you have that name, this is what we're going to enter on the first line here, and it must contain the words limited liability company or limited company, all right? So that name that you came up with. But then Article 2 is registered agent and registered office. Now earlier, when we clicked on that one result, I said there's a registered agent and registered office listed on the public databases. What the registered agent is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. This is really important in the instances if you were hypothetically being sued. There's something called a service of process notice. What's going to happen is that's basically saying that you're being summoned to court. That registered agent is going to make sure that you get that important documentation and that you have all the files that you need when you are showing up to court. The rules around a registered agent is you have to have one on file. They must have a physical mailing address within the state of Texas, and it cannot be a P.O. box. Now, you can make your registered agent like a friend down the street in Texas, as long as they're in Texas, or yourself if you have a physical address in Texas. But the downsides of that is obviously there's the professional part of it. You're not a professional registered agent, but more so it has to do with your privacy, because that information is going to be in a state database and it's going to be there for people to solicit you or try to do scams, like I mentioned earlier in that one video. So you want to make sure that you get a professional registered agent. And in a little bit later in this video, I'm going to explain how some services, those online legal tools, will provide this for you. But one in particular, Bizee, they actually have a free registered agent service for the first year too, which is pretty cool. So then once you put the registered agent information in, you have the limited liability company, initially has managers, the name and address of these managers are, and then this one is does not have managers. What you'll see sometimes with the LLC documents is there's managers and members. Managers are people who actually operate the LLC. Members are people who own it. So if you are somebody who's like a sole proprietor and you're setting up your LLC, it's a single member LLC is what it's going to be called. But if you're starting an LLC and other people are going to be operating that business, that's where managers get involved. Initial governing person, that would be you. If there's another person involved, which we're going to talk about too, is if you do have a multi-member LLC, you'd put that in there. Initial mailing address, any other provisions you want to provide, the name and the address of the organizer, which again may be you in the situation, and then effectiveness of filing. This document becomes effective when the document is filed by the Secretary of State. For this question here on the ABC, most people are going to pick A because you want this LLC effective as soon as possible, but for some reason, some people like to actually push that out. Now, execution is date, your signature, printed name, and then what you're going to do is you would mail this form in to the state address that was listed right up here, the Secretary of State. Now, you can go through the state website as well. You just create an online profile in their Texas state website, and it looks something like this, as you can see on the screen right here. It is typically easier than going the mail route, but I just wanted to actually walk through the document itself so that we can explain different aspects of it as we go through. Now, what I want to talk about next, though, is we talked about assigning a registered agent, writing your articles of organization, and filing your articles of organization. Why don't we talk about after the LLC formation process? And before we get to that, just to mention, this is not something that takes a day or two. It usually takes like 2-3 weeks. And the length of time it takes for you to actually incorporate depends on how busy the state is. What you'll see is at the very beginning of the year, or beginning of the months, you'll see more of these formation documents going through. So my recommendation is always just to go through with this and get going, because there is usually a delay. So if there's other things that you need to do in the meantime, you're going to have a few weeks to take care of those items. Now, after LLC formation, addition, you want to consider creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. There's only 5 states that actually require this. In Texas, it is not one of those states. So you don't technically have to have an LLC operating agreement, but it's a good idea. Why it's a good idea is, like, let's say that you started this coffee shop, but you had a business partner and it does really well. You have like 13 different locations. It's doing great. And something changes in your business partner's life. And one day they're like, hey, I want out of the business. How do you handle that situation? Well, if you have an LLC operating agreement that spells out who the managers and members are, what their roles and responsibilities are, and what happens if somebody wants to exit the business, you simply point back to that document, and that is what you're going to do. But if you don't have something like that in place in the beginning, then what you're going to do is you're going to get attorneys involved. It's going to be a very long process. It's going to be expensive and frustrating. So the LLC operating agreement is one of those examples where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You can just do a Google search for like free LLC operating agreements. You'll find some out there. If you have a more complex business, you may want to dial it in with a business attorney. But like I said, it's always a good idea to get that set up. Now, the online legal tools like LegalZoom and Zen Business and Bizee, those also have these boilerplate templates that you can use, usually for an extra fee, but those are available to you with those services as well. Next, you want to look into setting up an EIN. There's an IRS link here, and what that is an EIN is an employer identification number. It's a way for the IRS to identify your business, kind of like a social security number, but for businesses. Now, this is important because let's say that you're going to hire employees and put them on payroll. You have to have an EIN to be able to do that. But also, if you're applying for things like a business loan or an office space, sometimes it'll say like provide your social security number or your EIN/TIN. Those can be used interchangeably. It looks a lot more professional to be able to provide your EIN. It makes you look more legit as a business. So this process is free. If you go through this page, there's a button here to apply now. But if you go through the online legal tools, they can do this for you as well for an additional fee. Next, you need to look into the proper business licenses and permits. There's an SBA resource here that's worth checking out. But what I like to do is use the example of opening up a brewery. Now, if you're opening up a brewery, you're going to be brewing beer, you're going to be distributing beer, and you're also going to be serving beer. Those 3 things can require different licenses and permits because, as you would think, right, if you're opening up a bar, like, you're going to need a license to sell alcohol. But those 3 things can happen on the federal, state, and local level. My suggestion to you is you can start on the local level, call your town hall. It's kind of an awkward conversation where you're just like, hey, I'm starting this business. I just didn't know if there's any local licenses and permits that I need as I'm getting this business set up. And then they may be able to direct you if there's anything on the county level. If you go to the state level, if you just go to Google and search like Texas business licenses and permits, it'll take you to the state website, and then that will allow you to look through there and do some research as well. And then in the federal level, there's not many businesses that require the federal permits. There's just certain categories, but alcohol is one of them. So you want to check that out as well. Now, again, if this is something where you're kind of nervous about the process, there are research packages that a lot of the online LLC services provide for an additional fee, but it's usually around like $100 to $150. Well, they'll guide you through the business licenses and permits section. Not every business needs a business license and permit, but if you're going to be a chiropractor, a dentist, you're starting a construction company, these are things that are going to require different licenses and permits. All right, so we're through the actual formation process, but what I want to talk about now is kind of looking into your options here. So what you can see here in this section of the video is what we're going to be covering. And number 1 is the fees associated with setting up your LLC. And now what I want to do down here is go down to this embedded cost calculator, and we're going to go down to Texas. All right. This calculator shows us the top 5 LLC services online and what your cost would be after 5 years of ownership. Now, this is really important because you remember there was a $300 filing fee, but when you're looking at some of these numbers, I see $1,370 and I see all the way up to $2,837. Now, if you were to go with LegalZoom over Bizee, you would pay an extra $1,500 to get set up. Now, the reason for that is as you scroll down here, this is where you can see the state filing fee. The annual fee and biennial fee is saying 0 here. That's because there's not a filing fee. But what you should know is that in the state of Texas, they have what's called a franchise tax. Now, it really depends on various factors like what year it is, what your taxable revenue is. But I do want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that there is a franchise tax in the state of Texas, but they do not have an annual report filing fee, which a lot of states do have, all right? A CPA or an accountant would be able to help you figure out those numbers, but you can also go through the state website to figure those out as well. But again, you got to make sure that you're paying those taxes to make sure that your business can stay in operation. Now, if you go down a little bit further here, this annual report filing fee, that's not going to apply to you in the state of Texas. This is just what these services cost in any state. But what will apply to you is the registered agent service, which we talked about earlier in this video. What you can see is that Bizee offers it for free for the first year, and then it's $119 annually after that. But if you go to the high-end LegalZoom, it's $249 a year. So that's where you can start to see your costs really start to stack up when you're going with some of these services such as LegalZoom versus a Bizee. Now, there are extra services, one-time filing fees, like if you want just the EIN, if you want next day filing, expedited state filing, or business contract templates. All this information is going to be on this page. What I will say in this point of the video is that if you do end up using one of my links here, I end up making a commission from that. But a cool thing that we do is we donate $20 to a local charity on your behalf for doing that. Currently, we're partnered with a company called Crisis Services, and they answer phone calls for people in moments of crisis, so suicidal thoughts or domestic violence, these types of things. They help navigate them through those tough situations. So just know that it's kind of a win-win because it's still the same price to you. You get the lowest price possible, but also $20 goes to charity on your behalf. And there'll be links for those services in the description of this video as well. Now, next, what I want to talk about is a little star rating system that we've created here to explain the 3 different options that you have. Now, when you go through the state website, it's more of a DIY route, right? You're doing everything on your end. That is going to be the best possible cost. And the reason for that, again, is if you're a veteran, right? You can save money there. And also, there's not a lot of upsells. But the ease of use, maintenance, and services are going to be very low. When you go through online LLC services, I put it at 4 stars for the cost. And the reason for that is most of the services out there now in the base package have a $0 plus state fee package. But then what you have is you have the upsells, right? There may even be stuff where they're like, do you want to start a website? Do you want to get a domain name? Do you need help setting up your email? And there's these upsells here. So that's where your costs can kind of come in a little bit. So that's kind of a pro-con situation. If you're somebody who doesn't want to be upsold anything, go through the state site. If you're somebody who would like to be able to log into one dashboard and manage so many aspects of your business, that's where the ease of use and also the maintenance of online LLC services come in handy. Now, next, business attorney. Really what it comes down to is maintenance and services. A business attorney can dial in an operating agreement for you. If you're somebody who has a complex business, like maybe you have partners and you already have, offices in and out of state, these are reasons why you may want to go with a business attorney, but it may cost you $1,000, $2,000 to get your LLC set up, and maybe even more if you're getting that operating agreement set up. It really depends on your situation. And the one thing I want to mention right now is that sometimes the state websites can become a pain. Now, here's why. What we have here is something called the domestic LLC, and we're also talking about foreign LLCs. So let's say that your domestic LLC is where you're getting set up in the state of Texas, but you have offices or employees in other states. What you will need in some cases is a foreign LLC in those states. That is because you are operating a business in those states when you have a warehouse in Oklahoma or something like that, all right? So when you go through a state website, what ends up happening is as your business expands into other states, suddenly you're going to be logging in and renewing your LLC in different states, and different states have different rules. When you go through an online legal tool, all of this will be handled for you within that dashboard. It's much easier to manage because you can do everything through one tool as opposed to going out to multiple different state websites. This is also where some people try to get cute and they'll set up like an LLC in Delaware or Wyoming or something like that. But if you end up being on the payroll someday in the state of Texas, then you're going to be getting into domestic and foreign LLCs. So most times for most people, it's the best situation to just set up a domestic LLC within the state that you are actually physically doing business in. Quickly, I want to also talk about some questions worth asking yourself here. Now, what we have here is the state site, the online services, or talking to an attorney CPA. Now, if you want it fast and low cost, I would recommend going through the state site or online legal tools. But if you want one clean dashboard to manage your LLCs, again, going back to that example of like foreign and domestic LLCs, I will go through an online service. This question here is, do you have plans to have more LLCs in the future? Now, it may be hard to see it today, but perhaps, in 4 years, the business is doing well. You end up buying rental property through the business and they're out of state. Again, now you're getting into managing all these different state websites as opposed to just having one dashboard when you own other LLCs in the future. I've made this mistake with like domains. Like I'm like, oh, I'm trying to save $3 on a purchase of a domain. So I ended up having like 4 different domain services, and it got very annoying having them all spread out everywhere. And I wish I just put everything through one service. This one's very near and dear to my heart is, do you have low attention to detail? When you're going through the state website, it is completely on you to go through that process and make sure you're doing everything correctly. Now, if you go through an online service or an attorney, they're going to help you to work through those issues that people like me and potentially you have if you have low attention to detail. Next is, do you have offices out of state? I mentioned that earlier. That might be a good reason to talk to an attorney or a CPA. The reason I put CPA up there is they can act like a point guard for your business, because a lot of times they will have recommended resources or attorneys or different things that they can point you to, and they're a good person to start a conversation with. Because what you want is you want to be able to build a team around you and your business. So you have an attorney you trust, you have a CPA that you trust, these types of resources available to you. Do you have employees in other states? We mentioned this as well. If you have employees in other states, then you're going to get into domestic and foreign LLCs. It might be worth talking to an attorney. This one's interesting is the LLC for rental properties? The reason that we put attorney here is that if you're getting a bunch of rental properties, you may have several LLCs. There's something called a series LLC. That is where you can have one LLC and these sub LLCs underneath it for each of those rental properties. So in that particular situation, again, I think an attorney makes sense. This one here we covered earlier in the video when we were getting into S-Corps. But if you're currently making at least $40,000 of net profit, it may make sense to talk to an attorney. The reason for that is when you are self-employed, there are self-employment taxes, and those are 15.3%. Those are things like FICA, FUTA, and different things that you may see on a W-2 pay stub. But when you are a W-2, an employee, you are paying half of those taxes. The business is paying the other half. When you are a business owner, you are paying both sides of that, 15.3%. When you start an S-Corp, it is required that you pay yourself a reasonable salary. So let's say in this situation, you're paying yourself $50,000 a year because the business is making $100,000 a year net profit. The $50,000 that you pay yourself via payroll is going to be hit with both sides of that 15.3%. But when you take money out of the S-Corp in the form of a dividend or distribution, that is only paying half of those self-employment taxes. So that is where the tax savings comes in. And again, we're talking to a CPA or an attorney to start that conversation of, hey, my business is making $60,000 a year net income. Should I talk about doing an S-Corp? A lot of the online services can help you set up S-Corps, or you can go through the state website, but it is just my opinion that if you are already making that kind of income, it is worth spending a few $1,000s of going through an attorney and a CPA and making sure you're dialing in, because you're going to save on taxes on the back end anyways, but just making sure that you're setting everything up correctly. Now, last one, are you starting your LLC with a partner? The reason I said you should talk to an attorney here is simply like what we talked about with the LLC operating agreement and how issues can arise in the future. You want to make sure that everything is well thought out if you have a business partner. And again, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, it may be worth talking to an attorney. Now, later in this video, and I know I keep teasing things in this video, but it's further down the document, we're going to talk about in the bonus section about how you can actually get a free consultation from a CPA in your area if you're interested in any of these items here. Now, just to kind of recap this part, my advice is go through these questions and figure out what you're comfortable with and which option you want to go. I think for a lot of people, the online legal tools will make a lot of sense because they're the same cost, but it's an easier experience. And you have all these extra services, like if you want a website set up or a virtual mailbox. My recommendation for that is typically Bizee. And the reason for that is they are the most transparent in their pricing. They also haven't taken any venture funding. So a lot of the other services have taken hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. And what ends up happening when they do that is their investors want to see a return, and that comes at your expense. So that's why like a LegalZoom might cost $1,500 more, because again, they have to also pay their investors back as well. So typically Bizee is my recommendation if you're looking at LLC formation, unless you want to go through the state website because you're a veteran, or if you feel it's necessary to talk to an attorney. Now, part 3 here, we're going to kind of recap a few things about how to maintain your LLC. So I'm going to do this quickly, but there's a 7-point checklist. you want to complete any additional information requirements in your state. The one thing I want to mention here is if you're an attorney, a doctor, an accountant, there is a professional LLC. That is something that you may want to look into as opposed to the regular LLC. Some states like New York, they have ridiculous additional requirements where you have to post in a newspaper for 2 weeks about the start of a business. By the way, much easier for you setting up a business in Texas. Great state to do business in versus a lot of other states, especially New York. So good for you for getting a business set up there. Here we have the LLC operating agreement that we mentioned. Set up and keep up your registered agent to date, obtaining your EIN, opening up a business bank account. We talked about why that's so important with commingling funds, researching the necessary permits, and then maintaining LLC compliance and filing your annual report. What I like to say is if you go to a service like Bizee here, and I know I'm kind of like thumping the service right now, but I'm going to show you why. If you go LLC, and we're going to go down to Texas, what you can see in the gold package here is a lot of these things are taken care of for you. You have the free registered agent service. You have the EIN business tax number. If you need to set up an S corporation down the line, that's what this IRS form is about. Operating agreement, banking resolution, lifetime company alerts. This one is really key. When you go through the state website, they're not alerting you about stuff. If they do, it's a mailer from something that happened 3 months ago. When you go through these tools, they're going to let you know like, hey, you have to file your annual franchise tax report. All right. This is coming up and is due. You'll get a text message. You may get a letter and you may get an email. Now, typically, I don't enjoy getting that much communication, but when it's for something so important, such as making sure that your LLC is intact, I want those alerts. You have the online dashboard and then business banking account and business tax consultation. This service currently, they're using Bank of America for the business banking account. If you don't want to use that service or you have others in mind, you can always go with the free package. You know, it's free plus the state fee, and then you can add on different things that you need as well. So like my advice here is like when you're starting a business, it's not always about being perfect. What's more important is speed. Now, do you want to spend like 20 hours doing all this stuff yourself? Or do you want to spend a couple $100, streamline that, and then work on the important things, which is building your business, all right? It was a mistake that I made over and over again of like DIYing everything in my business. And I had to learn to be comfortable with spending a little bit of money so that I could actually focus my time on things like getting more leads in, getting more sales. Those are the things that you should be spending your time with, not trying to figure out if you have the right registered agent service or something like that, all right? Now, in the bonuses section, we already talked about the AI chatbot that's going to open up here for you for questions. Again, highly suggest that. The free charitable opportunity we mentioned as well. That's where you can get the $20 donated on your behalf to crisis services. But this one's really important. Let me zoom out a little bit. This is a document, and this will update each year. So if it's 2025 when you're watching this, there'll be the 2025 document in here. There is something called quarterly estimated taxes when you have a business. Now, these aren't necessary right away if your business isn't making money or is making less than $1,000. But once you think that you're going to owe at least $1,000 in taxes on your business, you have to start filing estimated taxes. So these are the date that these are due, and you're going to have to pay your federal taxes by these dates. And you can go online to do that, but what you can see here is this is Q4 for the previous year, but that happens in January. So January of 2025 on the 15th, you're actually paying for Q4 of the previous year. I just want to make you aware of that. Then what you have is you have a W-2 filing deadline. If you have employees, which would include yourself if you're in an S-Corp, you have to file your W-2s to those employees by the 31st. And the same is true for your contractors that you're using for a 1099 NEC. Now, if you're looking at a miscellaneous 1099, that's actually pushed out to February 28th. And then if you're doing the electronic filing of that, they give you an extra month into March. All right. I also put on here S-Corp and partnership due dates for taxes because those are different from a single owner LLC and C-Corps. As you can see, March 15th for an S-Corp, April 15th for a single owner LLC and C-Corps. Last thing here I mentioned is tax moves. If you do have something where you have a surplus of money in the business and you know there's things that you need to spend money on, many times if you have a business and it's doing well and you have extra resources, in December is a time when you can think about reinvesting in the business so you're not getting taxed on the additional income that the business has made because you're actually spending and reinvesting into the business. I also mentioned a solo 401k. If you're not familiar with that, it's just like a regular 401k, but let's say you're a single member LLC, you can set up what's called a solo 401k, and that's going to allow you to put money away towards retirement. When you're running your own business, you're not relying on a pension or something through the employer that you're working for. You have to do these things on your own. And that's what happens when you run your own business. It is a lot more work for you, but the freedom and flexibility it can afford you is tremendous. Because in this situation, you can have a 401k, and if you want to max it out, you can do that. If you want to do a profit share, you can do that. It is up to you. But you do need to get it set up before the end of the year to make contributions for that tax year. Now, right here it says, remember to renew your LLC. In the state of Texas, that is due between January 1st and May 15th, and that franchise tax fee that you're going to pay is based on the margin of the business. Like, what are the net profits of the business? But just know that by May 15th, that is due to the state of Texas. Next up, free CPA advice. We teased that earlier. Now we're getting to that, all right? This is not an affiliate link or anything to QuickBooks. This is just to find an accountant. And I like this service. And the reason for that is, like, let's say we put in a zip code for Dallas. You can find a pro advisor. And then what I want you to do is you would go to select service provided, and you can get into things like tax planning or tax setup, small business tax. So this is just based on 10 miles, and there's 20 tax advisors found. And then what you can see is these little blue boxes, offers free consultation, free consultation. And then what you're looking for is preferably somebody who is a CPA, that has a CPA designation. Let's see if we can find one on here. Here we go. CPA and CFP, and this person has five-star reviews, and they offer free consultation and can talk to you about business tax setup and making sure that you're doing things correctly within the business. And again, they might be somebody who knows an attorney if you think that's the route that you should go. But this is something, if you have a simple LLC, you can go ahead and get it formed, and then this might be your next step into finding that CPA that's going to work for you and your business. Now, don't feel bad if you can't hire them today. I would say don't abuse this service. It may be a situation where you have a conversation with them, and then all of a sudden in 9 months when the business is doing better and you're like, hey, I want you to file my taxes and help me with my books and finding a bookkeeper, all that stuff, then they can point you in the right direction. Future tax savings. We got into the S-Corp designation earlier, but there's a tax calculator here, which is pretty cool. And this is on the Bizee website. If you're interested in the specifics here, you can scroll down, and this is where, like, let's say you're making $90,000 and you pay yourself $40,000 of salary. This is where you can see that the total savings is $7,650 in taxes paid when you have an S-Corp designation. So again, I didn't want you to miss out on that because that's going to be really key for you. What I'd like to do next, though, is actually sign into the Bizee service and show you what the dashboard of what one of these online legal tools looks like. And on the screen right here, we have a review for Bizee, so you can see exactly what the dashboard looks like and all the different services afforded to you. And again, I highly recommend you get this checklist for yourself. There'll be a link in the description below. All right, we'll catch you in that next video.